Hey there, and thanks for checking out part 5 of my Relic Partscaster series. What I'm going to do right now, as I talked about in my last episodes, I'm going to start work on the neck. So once again, this neck I got custom built from Musicraft, officially licensed product by Fender. It's really nice. I've got a early 60s style, Fender design with the truss rod adjustment at the heel, which I know will make the overall adjustment of the final guitar a little bit more of a challenge, but I was going for that sort of period style and look anyway. The neck itself is really nice. It came with or one of the options was to have a sanding sealer applied versus bare wood. So I did that since it was sitting around for a little while before I used it and was able to apply and finish myself. So I didn't want any sort of environmental concerns. I'm going to have to deal with that a little bit now as I try to make this into a Relic look and how that affects the back. What I wanted to talk about right now though is getting the frets and getting I was going to tape it off, but I needed to do a little bit of the tiniest amount of fretwork. The way it came is really nice. The frets are nice and smooth and finished. As I run my fingers along the edges, I barely feel anything except for where the fat part of my finger, presses in, and I'm getting the sort of the edges of where the fret bevel is. And these are not rounded over; they are beveled, and it's not sharp at all, but it's just the slightest of edge that I can feel. I'm going to put a picture in here as well, sort of a close-up of those fret ends. So I've got a couple things I'm going to do to take care of that. I also noticed using my little fret rocker tool that I've got 1, 2, 3 that I've marked, 3 frets with this tiniest little bit of what appears to be a high spot there. As I use my fret rocker, get the right side here. If you can just hear that on the video. There. And there. And those are the only 3 places that I found on the entire neck where there's a little bit of high. I've gone ahead and I've marked them already with my red Sharpie so I know which frets I'm going to need to take a little bit of spot leveling on. To do that, all the tools I've got out, I've got my fret rocker here. Got one of these little fret shields to place over the top of the fret as I do a little bit of the work on the fret itself so I don't damage the wood. Got a 3-corner file with safety edges on it. Got this from Crimson Guitars. I've also got a fret crowning tool, 300 grit, diamond encrusted groove here for putting the crown on the fret back on. Got this from StewMac. A little bit of a polisher here, which helps if you've got any on the edges here. I'll probably do along the edges here. Just take care of, especially if you've got things like a little bit of fret sprout on any guitar that you have. This little polishing tool looks kind of like an emery board for your fingernails, but also got it at StewMac. It's not for fingernails. It's very useful. And then I've also got some fret rubbers here. So at the final stage of these 3 frets that I've done some work on, or the almost final stage, I'll use these to take out any marks left by the crowning tool or by the file, and these fret rubbers in 400, 600, 800, and 1,000 grit here to go ahead and help me polish up before I move on to, or if I want to, on a more fine grit there to polish those up. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple things here to take care of this neck before I tape it up and get it ready and start to do some of my initial prep work for lacquer on the neck. Okay then. Now the first thing I'm going to do is, like I mentioned, I'm going to just use this. It's got 3 sides on this extremely fine and a little bit more gritty, but still pretty darn fine. I'm going to use these on the edges here just to take care of any overlap or any fret sprout kind of a situation there. To really want to try and make this as comfortable and as smooth as I possibly can. And again, this is extremely fine, so not concerned about. Besides, I haven't lacquered anything yet, so certainly not concerned about taking any wood away or damaging a finish that I haven't applied. So this is so fine, it's almost like just polishing off any ends there. And MusicCraft makes these necks custom spec. There's a lot of options that you can apply directly to it. They may have some of these necks on hand stock. I don't recall if they have just some or if every one is a custom order. It does take a couple weeks for you to get it. I think this one took me almost probably about 4 weeks, but I wasn't in a rush when I ordered it, so it was not a problem at all, for me anyway, waiting for it to arrive, and extremely happy with it when it arrived. And yeah, I can already feel the difference, and I can kind of feel where I spent the least amount there up on the first fret, where probably could use a little bit more. One of the things I want to do as well is try and round over the fret ends a little more as well. Right now they're not sharp by any stretch, but they are flat. They're beveled, and that's the part that I can just feel as I run my fingers up and down the. Yep, don't feel any at all. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same on this side as well. And then coming back down, I'm gonna hit more of that beveled end. Yeah, same as the other side now. That's great. Okay, so as I said before though as well, how this fret wire is beveled, I can, when I push down, the meaty part of my finger obviously pushes over the top of the fretboard, and okay, well, I finished up with what I wanted to do on the frets, but I ended up doing something a little different, and I'm going to talk to you about what I did here. So I started off with my 3-edged file and my little protective fretboard mask, a little metal mask thing here, and I'm not sure I was getting the results really that I wanted, so I didn't do that too much. And what I instead did is I went and I just got couple pieces of very fine sandpaper. I've got from finishing 800, 1200, and I've got some micro mesh here that's at 1500. Obviously this goes up a lot higher, but I used the 1500 pad and then some steel wool. And essentially all I did was take, starting with the 800, and sand down the ends using my finger to allow it to go, sort of in between each of the frets, and then get those edges of that beveled edge that I wanted to kind of soften them and polish them up a little bit. I went from 800, then I did it again with the 1200. And then I did it again with the little micro mesh pad here at 1500. which is really all I felt I needed. Then I took some steel wool and I went back over the same thing again. I went over the edges, and I can really tell by looking at them that they are definitely softened up. They're a little rounded over to the top as opposed to that flat beveled edge that is either done by machine or an edge beveler, and it feels quite a bit different, quite a bit better, which is what I was going for. I don't know if it's the best ever. If somebody else has another method that's even better, that's great. But it ended up being a lot faster than to try and go and for this case, for this purpose, using this 3-edged file to round over each one. So I'm very happy, with those results. And I mentioned I had 3 high frets, which was the 8th, the 12th, and the 15th. It's just spot leveled. Using my StewMac 300 grit grooved. It's already got a crown in it file, where I had marked in. There we go. Where I had marked with the red, I just filed that down, kept checking, filed a little more, kept checking until I didn't get that tapping, clicking anymore. Used my fret rubbers to polish them back up from 400 to 600 to 800 to 1,000. And then when I was going back over all the frets there, and I had the 800, the 1200, or the 1200, the 1500, and using steel wool over at the end. So they look great, they feel great, and I think now I'm ready to go ahead and start figuring out how I'm going to tape off and how I'm going to remove the sanding sealer on the back so I can get to wood where I can put some of that stain. All right, I'm going to take a little break here while I figure some of that to get some of those supplies together, like my tapes and whatnot, and then I'll be back. All right, see you in a bit.